I dropped the ball on that, on some communication and stuff with 4th of July and everything. We're just going to push it back and do communion next week. Good to see everybody out. Trying to think, any other announcements? Homecoming's coming up, second week of August. So that's coming up quickly. Be in prayer about that. And where's Ron? Ron Smith, we're going to be celebrating him August 30th with a dinner. And how many of y'all were in youth group when Ron was around? I see some here. And there's some others. Hey, Lee. Hey, Rick. Good to see you, buddy. Glad you're back in.
Yep.
Been on the road. He's been driving the truck. I called him the other day. I think he was in Texas. And then another time.
Headed back now. I got to go to Ashland and pick up a load and then go back to Texas.
Go back out to Texas.
Hey, bud.
Be in prayer for Ted Gimber. He's doing better. He is feeling better. He's at home. So we want to be in prayer. A lot of y'all remember William Whitehurst, who was a teenager in our church a number of years ago. It's hard to believe he's 51. I said, how old are you, William? He had part of his foot amputated. He's got circulation problems and some problems with diabetes and complications from that. So be in prayer. I'm so blessed to have Jerry Boyce with us today and his wife Stephanie. And Jerry is going to share. He has been a part of a number of groups who called to Israel, who have been called to go to Israel. In fact, Kemper, to try to set this up, that he can come and speak about his archaeological experiences. When he called him, Jerry actually picked up he was in Israel when that happened. So we're glad to have. They have a busy day today. He is filling in the pulpit at Maranatha Baptist. A lot of y'all know Steve Conwell retired. He's doing pulpit supply. So, Larry, if we can ring it at 20 till and then at quarter till, so he's got time to get over there. Jerry, thank you for being. His wife, Stephanie, she works at Prexy Sports Center. Used to work with Karen. And so we're glad to have him today. And I'm going to pray, and then we'll turn it over to him. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you, Lord, for this nation that you have blessed, the 250 years on this earth, that you have blessed this nation to be constituted. And Lord, as we celebrate moving forward, keep us mindful that we're under you and under your sovereignty, your authority. We thank you for Jerry coming today. Pray you would just speak to us through his experiences as, Lord, he continues to do your work. Lord, bless him not just in this hour, but the next hour as he goes to preach the word. We pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Rick. I'd like to start off by saying anything on this table you can touch, you can handle, you're not going to hurt it. Even if you were to somehow drop it and it were to break, I'm going to laugh about it because I know that I got more at home. So I do want to explain just a couple of things that I have up here. This is just some pottery that's got some unique texture to it. These are tesserae. If you're familiar with mosaics, oftentimes at a site they're destroyed, they're scattered all over the place. These are some remnants. These are some flint blades that went with some of the tools that the ancient Israelites would use. The ages of some of this stuff range from probably 3,000 or 4,000 years old up to about maybe 1,000 to 2,000 years old. These are just some intact pottery handles that I've been able to find, and painted pottery pieces, and then some Roman glass, pieces of glass bracelets. These are about 2,000 years old or so. So I'll have these out again next week as well. I'll come here early enough if you want to, handle them, touch them, pick them up. I invite you to, we prefer if you do that instead of just looking at them because, quite frankly, thousands of years ago, this didn't mean anything to anybody. us to be able to date the area that we're actually excavating in. So what I want to do today is there's a whole lot of ground we could cover with regards to biblical archaeology. I just want to go over a few things real quick and then share with you guys the experience I had just a handful of weeks ago and what we were able to do at Shiloh. So I want to explain where Shiloh is and why Shiloh is important. If you were to go to Israel today and hang out in Jerusalem, you could take a car ride about 20 miles north to a place called Tel Shiloh, otherwise known as Shiloh. Modern day Shiloh is just located one hill over. It is actually, by volume of volunteers, the largest archaeological dig in the Near East or Middle East, and maybe even in the world, as far as the number of volunteers that we get every year. Anybody can volunteer. You do not have to have any experience whatsoever. There's no age limit. In fact, our dig director says he prefers for older people to show up because they're used to pain and suffering. And so, our typical morning, we wake up. I wake up sometimes around 3:30 in the morning. We have breakfast at 4 a.m. We're on the bus headed to the site by 5 a.m. It's about a 30-minute trip. We get there as the sun is rising. Then we work until about 10:30. We have lunch, and at 1 o'clock we pause for pottery washing. All of the pieces of pottery that we find that fall under the umbrella of what we keep, we wash every day about 2,000 pieces of pottery. That pottery is then analyzed the next day, and that just helps us to kind of date what area we're excavating at. Shiloh is important because it was the first religious center that Israel had after they conquered the land. They spent 40 years on the other side of the Jordan. They crossed the Jordan. And then for several years was the conquest. They didn't fully conquer the whole land of Canaan, but they conquered enough to get in, to settle down. They get to Shiloh. They did not have to attack or fight the occupants of Shiloh. Shiloh let them come in, and they set up the tabernacle there at Shiloh, and for over 300 years, that is where the sacrificial system was in place at. And so when we arrived there 10 years ago, but 2 years we didn't excavate because of COVID. But for 8 seasons, we've been excavating 3 main areas of the site. We did not know when we began to excavate what we would find. One of those sites was excavated in the 1980s. It was a location maybe about the size of this building. And it was where the bones from the sacrificial system ended up being deposited at the site. And so we were able to pull out thousands and thousands of animal bones from kosher animals, with a majority of those bones being from the right side of the animal. And that was the priest's portion. So when the priest would receive what they had, they would deposit these bones into an area. But it wasn't just a bone deposit. It was an offering site. Pottery was deposited there. Gold objects were deposited there. Most archaeologists in Israel go their whole career, they never find any gold whatsoever. We have found 7 pieces of gold in one area. And within that one area, 80% of that area had already been excavated before we showed up. And so in 20% of that area, we found 7 pieces of gold. The team that was there in the 1980s that excavated that spot found 1 piece of gold. The reason why we found so many is because of the technology that we use to look for objects, including dry sifting, which is very popular among archaeologists, but wet sifting. Wet sifting is not as popular. Our team has been trying to convince the archaeologists that when you wet sift, you find 80% more small finds than you find by dry sifting alone. And so some of the most famous archaeological discoveries in the past dozen years have been through the technology of wet sifting, which can be difficult to implement in the field depending on where you're at in the land of Israel. So we've been excavating that bone deposit. We've been excavating what we believe to be the gate of the city. This is where Eli the high priest would have been sitting at when he received news that the Ark of the Covenant had been stolen, that his 2 sons had been killed in battle, if you're familiar with Old Testament history. Upon hearing the news that the Ark was stolen, he fell over backwards, he broke his neck, and most likely he was sitting in the gate complex, awaiting news from the battlefield. We're excavating what we believe to be that gate complex. We're also excavating a building that dates back to the time of Joshua, that matches the biblical proportions and dimensions of the tabernacle. And within the confines of that building, we have found things related to sacrifices, altar horns, pieces of demolished altar, things that went on the priest's garments, pomegranates, and other things that are directly related to a priest and his duties. So in short, we believe that we're excavating the location of the tabernacle. Once Israel got into the land and they set up shop there at Shiloh, they built a house for God. And when you read the book of 1 Samuel and compare it with older Old Testament passages, you can kind of see the morphing that you go from a tent dwelling to a building with walls and a door. Ancient Jewish literature talks about the tabernacle being a house of stone with the roof being made out of animal skins, and that is actually what we're excavating there at Shiloh. Every year, more and more news stories come out. If you're familiar with the New York Post or the Jerusalem Post, you may have seen recent news articles talking about archaeologists in search of the Ark of the Covenant. We're not searching for the Ark of the Covenant. We don't believe the Ark of the Covenant is at Shiloh. But because we're excavating a building that is connected with the Ark of the Covenant, and because the city is connected with the Ark of the Covenant, you'll probably see some sensational headlines in the news about that. Rest assured, we've not found the Ark, and if we did, we couldn't tell you. We have not found the Ark. And so those are the 3 main areas that we're excavating. We had no idea when we began that we would find this building. We had no idea when we began that we would be uncovering the gate complex. The area that was allotted to us and the area that we wanted to excavate rests between 1980s excavation and 1920s excavation, and we wanted to kind of bridge the gap between the two, and it just so happens that we have found these things that are very, very vital to our understanding not only of the biblical culture, but also the Old Testament and the sacrificial system. So I want to just kind of go through what I did this year in the area that I was assigned to. I want to leave some time for questions, if you got any questions. Next week, I'm going to have a few more things here. I'm also going to provide you with some websites and some resources if this interests you, if you want to explore a little bit further about the things I've been talking about, more information on how you can either get involved or keep up with what's happening at the excavation. I'll have that next week. But I want to kind of go through sort of just what I did this year and kind of explain how this goes. So this area where I'm at, I'm going to use this table as an illustration. So when you think of the temple, Solomon's temple, you think of the tabernacle. The building was built on a 2-to-1 ratio from the most holy to the holy place. So I'm going to use this table sort of as a representation of that. So if I were to break this on a 2-to-1 ratio, sort of from this remote back would be the most holy place, or what we would call the Holy of Holies. And this area would be the holy place. And within the location of the Holy of Holies would have been the Ark of the Covenant. And then and this section would be some other pieces of furniture in the tabernacle. Where I'm spending my time excavating this past season was basically right in this area right through here. On the site, if you were to visit the site, we get hundreds of visitors a day. In fact, Mike Huckabee visited our excavation on the last day. He wet sifted for a few minutes, so we made him an honorary member of our excavation, gave him a t-shirt. This is not the first time he's visited the site. And then other dignitaries and higher-ups in Israel visit the site, because word is getting out that we are finding a building that matches what the Bible describes as being the tabernacle. But if you were to visit the site, right, almost providentially separating this section from this section is one of the main walkways. And our job was to finish connecting the wall that shows up here with the wall that kind of shows up here. This would be the north wall of the building that we're calling the monumental building. It's a building bigger than any dwelling. It's the biggest building so far at the site. And so until we publish our discoveries, some people prefer to call it just the monumental building. Some people want to just go ahead and call it the tabernacle. So I may use those terms interchangeably. But so I'm in this section here. We're looking for this wall, and we're uncovering other walls that are associated. The Romans, when they took over the area, they built on top of a lot of these older walls that date back to the time of Joshua. And so this is kind of a before shot. We sectioned off this area, and my job is to go down, and I'm looking to connect a wall that we're really not interested in because it's Roman time, but you got to find it, you got to excavate it, you got to record it, you got to take pictures. So for this particular task, we're looking for a Roman wall. And as I'm excavating down, stones start to appear, and the picture's not super clear, but nevertheless, we're going down, finding more stones. You can kind of see the difference between this photograph and that photograph. I try to take one at the end of every day or the beginning of each day. And so you can see as we call it draining the bathtub. We don't dig holes in archaeology. We try to bring the whole area down and expose everything sort of at the same time. Almost as if you have a bunch of toys or things in a bathtub, and you drain the tub, and the toys or whatever starts to kind of appear as you're draining down. So we get down. Now it comes time to remove this stuff. And so we take pictures, we take measurements, we record the data, we remove the rocks, and now we're finding the wall that we were looking for. And that's just kind of one small section of where I was at. A bigger section is facing to the east. You'll notice this wall running right through here. This is called wall number 10. It happens to be the 10th wall that we uncovered in the excavation, and so that's how it gets the fancy name, Wall 10. Yeah. Wall 10 is this wall that runs along the length of this building right here. It's about 40 inches wide, and in some places it's about 9 or 10 feet tall, which is incredibly large for a building wall dating back to the Iron Age, late Bronze Age, early Iron Age. And so our task is to bring all this dirt down, and then we want to connect this wall to the other section of wall that we already have. And so I'm facing to the east. The sun is rising right here, and when the priest would step out of the tabernacle, because you had an east entrance, when he stepped out, this would be what he was looking at. Here is modern day Shiloh, Shiloh, and then some of our team members there. At the end of the first day, we have brought dirt down. We've not found the wall yet, but that's not super discouraging because this wall sort of goes up and down. Some of these stones are real close to the surface, some are not. Again, I apologize for the picture quality. I think it's the communication between the TV and my computer. You can see sort of how the wall is beginning to appear, and we're finding some of the main stones for the wall. And this takes time. Sometimes we can go fast, sometimes we have to go slow, depending on what we're finding. More and more stones coming out. And finally, you can kind of see this whole row of stones going right through here. And then more stones are starting to pop out in this area. Whoops. And so there is the completion of wall 10. We have all of the top courses here. And where I'm standing at is literally on the main walkway going through the site. We really can't bring that wall any closer to the other side than what it is. At the end of the presentation, I'll show you one of our final drone shots of the whole area so you can kind of get a better idea of what we're looking at. That wall that I was explaining in the very first of my slides is a wall that's coming through here into here. So you can kind of see that wall. We're having to trace all these walls, try to reverse engineer what's happening. I want you to imagine going to a location in a town where a building has been destroyed and people sort of just throwing dirt on it and building another building. And then that building is destroyed and it's leveled out, and then another building is built on top. And then 3,000 years later, somebody comes through and they're trying to figure out what's happened. And that's kind of what it's like for us. Layer upon layer. Some sites in Israel have over 20 destruction and rebuild layers.
Wow.
If you were to go to a place called Tel Megiddo, they got 26 or 27 times the city has been destroyed, flattened, built upon, destroyed, flattened, built upon, so that when you go to that site today and you stand back, you're looking at this large mound kind of in the middle of nowhere, and that mound is just layer upon layer. If you could think of a layer cake. And as you dig through these layers, you realize, hey, this layer is 1,000 years old, the next layer is 1,500, then it's 2,000 years old. And pottery is super helpful in dating that. Within the work of uncovering that wall, I want to show just a couple of objects that we find. This is a sling stone, or what we call a hand-thrown stone. Most of these stones are made out of pieces of flint. I'll be bringing one next week, and I'll be bringing some pieces of flint to kind of further illustrate how this works. But obviously, battle technology, way back in the yonder days, it really got down to trying to hit people with stuff that was either going really fast or really sharp. And sling stones was one of those things. Our excavation began to find over the years just an incredible amount of sling stones and hand-thrown stones and larger stones that were fired from ballista machines. We've actually been able to prove to the world that in AD 69, prior to the destruction of Jerusalem, that the Romans came through and totally destroyed the town of Shiloh. In fact, in just 2 weeks alone, I found about 8 either sling stones or ballista balls, or in part or in whole, in just one 15-foot by 15-foot section. And so the battle was super hot in our location. And this is what a hand-thrown stone would look like. They were more kind of squared off, so you could put them in a pile and they just wouldn't roll everywhere. They weren't quite as aerodynamic as a sling stone. And they could be used as a sling stone because, quite frankly, when you realize you're about to be killed, you're going to be throwing everything you can at the enemy. This is a sling stone that I found with a nice, pretty pick mark right there in the middle. So I was able to take pictures of it laying there where I found it. This is actually a pottery dump, and some of these handles came from that. Apparently, we were excavating in a place where 2,000 years ago, a potter was doing his work not far from here, and apparently flawed or broken pieces of pottery were just being thrown in a pile. I don't have any pictures today of this pottery dump, but if you can imagine about 4 feet wide and 2 foot tall, just a wall of broken pottery, which is really cool at first. You realize we got to wash all this pottery. It's like, oh, more pottery, yay! Pottery. If you go to any site, and has anybody in this room been to Israel on a tour?
Kemper's about the only one, I think, in the church.
And he'll be here.
He'll be here next week. Yeah.
You go to any site, pottery is everywhere, and you're like, oh man, this is really cool. And when you begin to excavate for the first time, you're so excited. You find a piece of pottery, and then at the end of the day, when you got to wash it all, you're like, oh, okay, pottery, yes. And so this is that same stone in my hand that's been cleaned off. And if this were to hit you going about 90 to 100 miles an hour, it would hurt a lot. And so I was at my brother-in-law's church last Sunday. Stephanie's sister's husband sort of got me into this, and so we tried to dig together, excavate together. This year we were not able to do so. I had got a promotion within the staff. He got a promotion, and so we're just digging 2 separate weeks. But a dig season is 4 weeks. We try to time it between school being out so professors and students can help. We try to take into account the weather. And also, quite frankly, it takes us a year to process everything that we find. We research on it, we write about it. He was illustrating how a sling would work in the old days. And so we're actually slinging rocks that came from Shiloh. So this is just a pretty cool rock, pretty cool stone that was used by the Romans. This would have been a tack in their sandals. And so we find a lot of these quite often. In fact, we've been able to discover that even the tacks and the tack sizes is indicative of what Roman legion was in the area. And we've been able to ascertain that the 10th Roman legion is the legion that was responsible for coming to Shiloh. The battle was reconstructed as best we could with the information we got, along with the help of a retired Army colonel and an Old Testament professor of warfare. And they think probably within an hour or two, the whole place was destroyed unless everybody was killed. And then they packed up and went back home. This is, I think this is actually a ballista. Yeah, it is. It's a ballista stone that is basically lying sort of right on top of wall 10 in this area right here. So we take pictures of it while it's there in situ. You can kind of see the dimensions. This is a 10 centimeter section there. Pulled it out of the ground, washed it off, and there it is in my hand. You can see it's considerably larger than a typical sling stone. This would have been fired out of a machine called a scorpion. The Romans would use it to launch these stones at a high rate of speed that would hurt, and also shoot big long bolts. There is a picture of another one that I found as well, and I think that's the same. Yeah, that's the same one there. This is a flint blade. You'll see I got some pieces down here that are in a similar shape. This one was actually quite large. Found it on accident. When you're excavating, we have actually a little frustrated the first handful of days, because when you begin an excavation, you don't always know what you're going to find, where you're going to find it. And my first year there, we dumped all of our dirt and rocks that we've already removed. We dumped it in a particular location, and then as the years passed and we began to discover this building and the walls, well, lo and behold, this year I got to move a lot of that stuff that I put several years ago down. And so a large portion of our area was modern day, we just call it modern day trash. It wasn't trash, it was dirt and rocks that we had already been. And so we're just moving this stuff out, trying to get down to, we just call it trying to get down to virgin territory where nobody's excavated before. And there was one small section of dirt that I was just going to push off into a ditch. Quite literally, I was pushing it off into the ditch, and this popped up. This so happened to be the largest flint blade. I want you to imagine a sickle, a curved piece of wood or bone that has these flint blades placed in them, sort of in a line. And that's what they would use to cut their grain with. In fact, on this blade here, if you were to hold it up to the light, you can see that there's a patina on each of the cutting surfaces where it had just been going through plants for who knows how long. And so some of these are in holes, some of these are only made to be this long. Some of these have been broken off. This was probably an end piece that had been broken off. So, invite you to handle those at your pleasure. Again, just some common items that we'll find. This is a piece of Roman glass. It was at the very center of a base. We didn't catch this sifting through the dirt. It was too encrusted with dirt. We only found this after it went through our wet sifting station. So there's a lot of things that we find. This is not overly important. It does kind of give us the context of what we're digging at, but that could have just as easily been a seal impression of during a certain king's rulership. It could have been a scarab or one of these little tiny stone beetles that have a lot of information carved into it. It could have been a coin. But this just kind of shows you how we benefit from wet sifting. This is a broken loom weight. Again, these are some of the common things that we would find. Talk about wet sifting. This is our wet sifting station. Each square supervisor and team is assigned a color. You'll see the tags in these bags. These tags are explaining to our wet sifters what location we're working at in the square. So when they happen to find something, they return it to us, and we record the data in our logbook. And so here's folks that are wet sifting, and this is an area where we eat our lunch at, where we wash our pottery at. This is a sort of a visitor center that explains the site. This is my team right here. I guess this was a drone shot. So I could be up there, I don't know, but this is where the particular area that we're working at. This is the walking path coming through the site I was explaining about earlier. The gate is over in this area, and the bone deposit is sort of over here. They placed it where the prevailing winds would take the scent away from the city. A couple of pictures of our staff. This is myself with a group of archaeologists that are connected with 2 different universities that have merged their archaeological students together. So I'm working on a master's degree in biblical history and archaeology. These are some of my professors, fellow students. This is our dig director, Scott Stripling. Scott and the team with ABR maybe I can explain who ABR is real quick. The Associates for Biblical Research is the organization that oversees the excavation. And in 2019, Dr. Stripling, with a group of archaeologists, went to Joshua's altar at a location called Mount Ebal. They were going to dry sift and wet sift material that had been excavated in the 1980s to show archaeologists the importance of wet sifting, because they pretty well knew that they were going to find things that the dry sifters had missed. And if you've been keeping up with biblical archaeology over the past couple of years, an object has been found about the size of this that has really rocked the world of biblical archaeology. And that discovery was a folded piece of lead called a curse tablet that had been found buried at Joshua's altar. This was not found in dry sifting. It was found in wet sifting. And it was discovered by a woman named Frankie Snyder, who was our organization's smalls finds expert. She sees it, she immediately recognizes it as a curse tablet. Curse tablets are known in the ancient world. It is simply in this case, it's a piece of lead with a curse that was written in it. And it's sort of a binding agreement between whoever is writing the inscription and that person's deity. A lot of curses were trivial things, my neighbor stole my cake recipe, I hope her hair falls out type of stuff. Silly things. But this particular curse tablet had inscribed on it the earliest known inscription of the Hebrew God, Yahweh. And the name of God is represented in the Hebrew scriptures in 4 letters. The earliest rendition of the name is represented by 3 letters. And the curse tablet reads, and there's always going to be debate on what it actually reads, because at this point in time, the reading order could have been left to right, right to left, up and down, down to up. Quite frankly, if you were to look at all the letters on the tablet, you wouldn't even know where to begin. But it basically says, cursed you are by the God Yahweh, die, you will die, surely you're cursed. There's a couple different renditions. But what puts all this into context is Mount Ebal is known as the Mount of Curses. When the Israelites got into the land, the tribes were split up. Half went to Mount Ebal, the others went to a mountain right across the valley, Mount Gerizim, and they would pronounce blessings and curses to each other. And prior to the sacrificial system being implemented at Shiloh, if you had to make things right with God, you went to the Mount of Curses. And so they discovered the curse tablet. Of course, a discovery of that magnitude has come under a lot of scrutiny, a lot of debate, and but at the end of the day, we now have, by centuries, I think the earliest inscription was maybe 300 years younger than that. And so we have in our possession, and the world can now see what the name of God would have been looked like if Joshua himself were to write it down. And this is a group photograph. This is me back here. We are on an ancient Canaanite wall in the bone deposit area. And so last year I was excavating sort of in this area. We believe we basically have found just about all the bones that are associated with that. We have 2 years left at Shiloh probably before we move on down the road. This village up here is where Judas Iscariot grew up at. And so it's interesting to note that he would have been within walking distance of Shiloh there. He would have seen the remnants of the tabernacle and ultimately the portray our Lord. Two more photographs. This is a drone photograph of this area right here, the Holy of Holies, or the most holy place. You can see this is a clear picture of wall 10 right here. Then we have other walls that are coming along here. It's a little dangerous to excavate more of here because it's probably 10 foot from here down to there. So we have the most holy place, and then here's the walkway, and this is wall 10. This is the area that I was excavating at, and then you remember I was talking about finding a Roman wall. This is that Roman wall in the first set of pictures. I'm sorry if I'm blocking you guys' view. Wall 10, and so it's hard to see from this photograph, but we got sections of the walls that make up this building right here. It's just some of the things that are in this picture. We got some things that we're not quite sure what all these are. This, let me explain what this is. At some point, let me back up. In Israel's history, they obviously didn't always follow God the way they were supposed to. But God in His grace still loved them. He did not cast them out forever. But there came a point where Eli's sons, who were priests, they basically said, hey, if we go to battle against the Philistines, let's bring the Ark of the Covenant. Because, hey, God's for us. Who can be against us? We're just going to bring this into battle. And they were treating the Ark of the Covenant like a genie in a lamp. The Ark of the Covenant was stolen. It was placed into a Philistine temple where their fish god Dagon resided. The Ark never got back to Shiloh. The Bible does not describe the Philistines destroying Shiloh. But we have excavated, and Stephanie was helping 1 year with that. We've excavated a burn layer, a destruction layer that carbon dates to around 1050 BC, give or take. This would have been the time period that the Philistines stole the ark. We believe the Philistines came here and destroyed the tabernacle. And then the Israelites filled it all in with the dirt that's kind of a unique color. So but at some point somebody said, hey, let's dig a hole here and make a grain silo. And so they did that. Now, this large circular structure right here is in the geometric center of this building. Yeah. And we're not quite sure what it is yet. We're toying around with the idea that it was an altar right there in the middle. Because you had the altar of sacrifice, and you had an incense altar, and then you had a few other things going on. So, all right, now, we got 5 minutes or so. I'll be here next week as well too to kind of talk a little bit more about all this. I'll have a few more other objects, but are there any questions that I might can help answer before we have to dismiss? Yes, sir.
What is the difference between dry sifting and wet sifting? And my second question was the scorpion, was that like a catapult? What did it look like?
So the scorpion looked like a large crossbow. It didn't catapult the stone. It actually shot it like it would a large arrow. So dry sifting, when we bring the material out of the ground, we take it into a large rubber basket type thing we call a goofa. And we take it to a wire screen that's got a wood frame on it. We just dump it in there, and then we sift. And we kind of break up the dirt clods. We do a quick scan of objects, pottery, flint pieces. Sometimes I found a coin my first year dry sifting. It just is a little flat piece of green looking something, and I said, well, that's a coin. Then we dump all the stuff that stays in the sifter. We dump that in a chute that goes into a mesh bag. That mesh bag gets taken down to the wet sifting, where they'll soak in the water for a little bit to loosen up the dirt. Then they'll dump that into a sifter and spray water on it and kind of pick through it. It's really tedious, but it's really exciting. It's hours of mundane nothing interrupted by periods of like immense excitement.
Sort of like a soccer match.
Well, I don't do soccer, but you're right. Yes,
So
sir.
were the stones manufactured, or were they go down to the river and find a suitable stone?
For like a sling,
Yeah, or the throwing stone.
most of them are manufactured out of flint knuckles because of the density, the toughness of it. I'm gonna bring 2 stones next week. One is not flint, but you can see they started chipping away at it to make it something. And the other is a stone that would have been an opportunistic stone to use. There's a phrase, any chair will do in a bar fight. And so when it comes to slinging and throwing stones, so the stone to kill Goliath, let's talk about that real quick. It probably was not a small stone. David probably picked up a stone about the size of a pool ball, or between a pool ball and a golf ball size. Experimental archaeology has shown us that stones that are not perfectly smooth have a way of either snagging in the pouch or just not being super aerodynamic, and it loses velocity as it meets wind resistance. But yeah, they'll just chip away at these things.
And when y'all got there, was there anything on top there? Or did you start at ground level?
Oh yeah, none of this was exposed. None of this was exposed. None of this was really exposed.
But it was dirt. It wasn't other buildings there.
It was dirt, right? Yeah. Now, some parts of Wall 10 had Roman wall on top of it. We take pictures, we take measurements, we give them names, and we take the Roman stones off because our interest is the time of Joshua, not necessarily the time of the Romans. We spend a week at the end of the dig going through and putting like cement in some of these stone areas to keep the wall standing for generations to come. Yes,
I'm going.
When you refer to the walkway, that wasn't a walkway in the ancient days. Do you think you might have missed something underneath there, or do they eventually, do you not worry about what's underneath the water?
Our main goal is to show that this wall goes all the way through. Now, if this wall would have been more underground, we probably would get permission to move that walkway. It's providentially our dig director, when he drove the first stake in the ground, he drove it somewhere in this corner back. And so we really believe the Lord's blessing our efforts. I'll say this real quick and I'll be done. Certainty in archaeology is a rare thing to have. Can we say with 100% certainty that we have located the tabernacle of the Lord? Probably not certainty. But when you have something that looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, probably a duck.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for your attention. I'll be here next week. These will be up here. We're going to hang around for a few minutes. We're going to take this back with us. We'll bring it back next week. I'll have a few more things. And then if you got any questions about biblical archaeology overall, if you'll bring them next week. I want to talk about some of the latest things that's been in the news about biblical archaeology. And thank you, Pastor Rick.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right.